Hey there, my name is Lexi, and in this video, I'm going to be talking to you about the different edit modes in Pro Tools. So if you look to the top left-hand side of your screen in Pro Tools, you'll see that there are these four squares here, or rectangles, whatever you want to call it. There's shuffle, slip, spot, and grid. These are the different editing options that Pro Tools allows you to work within during your session, depending on, what you need it for. So I'm just going to go through what the formal descriptions of these things are and then tell you what they can be used for as well. So first off, we are in the editing window, which is where you will see these functions to be able to select them. And the edit window provides a timeline display of audio, MIDI data, video, and mixer automation for recording, editing, and arranging tracks. So it displays waveforms for the audio in your session and is the main window that you'll use to work directly with audio, MIDI, video files in Pro Tools, or, whatever kind of audio track you're editing. So this is where everything that you record in your session is going to be immediately visible to you for your manipulation and whatever you want to do during the time, basically. So let's hop right into it. The different edit modes that there are. So there's shuffle, slip, spot, and grid again. So starting with shuffle mode, the formal description of this. In shuffle mode, region movement is constrained by other regions, and any changes you make affect the placement of subsequent regions on the track. When you move a region in shuffle mode, it will snap to the previous or next region on the track. So additionally, when you perform an edit such as trim, cut, delete, or paste material, all regions to the right will slide along the timeline in a train car fashion to make space when adding material or to close the gap when you're removing material. Use shuffle mode as a convenient way to make regions line up next to each other without overlapping or leaving silence between them. So for me, I don't really use shuffle mode that often, but when I do, I find that it's really useful for things such as a 15, 20, or 30-second edit if you have just a plain instrumental track. So, working off of what the official definition or description of what shuffle mode is, when you select certain regions and you delete it, it's actually going to shift all of this over to fill in that space, so there's not going to be any silence left. So you see I just cut this piece out. I'm going to hit delete and watch what happens to that track to the right. That track to the right now moves over, and as you can see, I'm trying to slide it over, but it's not going to let me have any kind of silence. And if I want to move this track, it's not really letting me move it over unless I wanted to move it to the end of here, and then it would allow me to move it. So it's not going to really give you any free reign as far as your editing tools. Those editing tools like the trimmer, the grabber, they're going to be kind of restricted when you're using this mode. But again, back to my point of it being really great for making sound edits like 15, 20-second, and 30-second edits. If you are using shuffle mode, it's great for that because the track automatically slides down for you, so you're not having to slide it and try to find that perfect placement yourself. So how you would do that, you would look for a transient or a spot in your beat where it's consistently hitting with probably like a kick drum or snare or something. So let's listen. Let me take it off mute first. Boom, 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 boom. So those are where our hits are. So let's say I chose a random one, cut it at that transient, and now I want to bring this transient in right here. So I'm going to cut just before that. I'm going to select this piece. So it sounds like this right now. So if I delete that, it's going to slide that track over, and now it's going to sound like this. So, and I didn't make a really smart selection as far as what would make sense musically to bring over next, but basically you would listen to your track and you would figure out which piece would make the most sense to move over, and then chop it up according to that, chop it up according to that making sense. So what you would do is just find the best piece the best part in your music that would make the most sense to move over. And then that's how you create those 15, 20, and 30-second edits. But anyway, that is what the shuffle mode is mainly used for that kind of application. The next mode is going to be slip mode. So in slip mode, you can move, trim, cut, or paste regions freely within a track without affecting the placement of other regions on the track. So in this mode, you can place a region anywhere on the track, leaving space between it if you want to, between it and other regions. It's also possible to move a region so that it overlaps or completely covers another region. So use slip mode when you want the trimmer, selector, grabber, and pencil tools to work without restrictions to placement in time. So unlike the shuffle mode, I have no restrictions. I can move this track anywhere I want to. When I'm making edits, such as cutting and deleting stuff, it allows me to leave space, and then I can move this any way I want to. Let's say that I want to move this piece over here. I can overlap there if I want to. And again, it just gives me free reign to do whatever I want, basically. I know I said that a lot of times, but I can do what I want with slip mode, and Pro Tools is not going to stop me, basically. So the most useful application that I find for slip mode for me when I'm in a session is when clients want like a stutter effect on their voice. So in slip mode, it's just a lot easier. All you have to do is use that tab to transient feature. Let's say I wanted to make a stutter in my beat, actually, because I don't actually have any vocals in this session, but let me find a good transient to use. I'm going to use that clap. So I would tab to transient, cut it right there, and then cut it just before that next transient hits. And let me just show you what it would sound like. I'm gonna take that off. So pretend these are vocals right now. So I would do that, select the piece that I want, and then just duplicate it to create like a stutter effect. So now it sounds, instead of sounding like this, now it's gonna sound like this. Yeah. And then I could draw the beat out to start from there. Yeah, and that's how you would create a beat, a stutter within your beat or within vocals. Let's say that you wanted to just isolate a particular word that your artist said. You can do that, and then you can create a stutter effect by doing exactly what I did. Ooh, that was kind of dope. Yeah. If I could make that sound right, that would be dope. But yeah. So yeah, that's what it's really useful for, creating stutter effects, in my opinion. Shout out to Steph C, by the way. He produced this beat. It's called Lil Uzi type beat, produced by Steph C Baby at 150 beats per minute. This particular track is G flat minor, that's the key, and 150 beats per minute. That's the tempo of the song. If anybody was curious, you can search it on YouTube and see if he'll let you use it for some of your stuff. Boom. But moving right along to the next editing mode, we have spot mode. In spot mode, you can move or place regions at precise locations by specifying the destination location in a dialog box. As in slip mode, edit operations do not affect the placement of other regions on the track. When spot mode is enabled, Pro Tools prompts you with a dialog box when working with regions, allowing you to specify the start, end, duration, or other relevant parameters. Use spot mode when you want to control the placement or duration of a region using precise numerical values. Now, I don't actually have very much experience using spot mode, or I never really found it necessary because I'm mostly in a recording studio, but I imagined that it would be most applicable in editing for videos. If you are wanting to sync audio to different movie scenes, I imagine that it would be the most useful for that. So I don't have any video clips in here to be able to show you a really good example of that, but let's just say that you have a video clip and a certain piece of audio starts in a specific spot. So you would click on that clip and Pro Tools would tell you where that clip starts. The audio that you need, if you know where it is, you would just click on whatever specific piece of audio that you found, figure out how long it is. This one is about 4 bars, just a little over 4 bars, but it starts here and it ends here. That's the duration. The sync point is also the start of that point. So let's say that I wanted to move it to that 15 bars, or for the sake of this video, let's move it to like 27. See if we can make a jump. So we'll move it to bar 27. And then it moves over to that specific spot. So I imagine it's really great for, editing sound for video. If you want to get a precise measurement of where your audio needs to be compared to where your video is, to get that perfect lineup and that perfect syncing for your video. So I imagine spot mode is the best for that. But moving on to grid mode. Oh, and again with spot mode, just like the slip mode, you can pretty much move your clips anywhere you want to. There's not really any restrictions on your tools. And yeah, that is spot mode, lovies. So on to the final editing mode of Pro Tools, the grid mode. Now there are actually a couple of options with grid mode. There's grid mode, like snap to grid, like absolute grid, and then there's relative grid. So we're going to start with the absolute grid, which is the blue, you can see here. Boom. So in grid mode, regions and MIDI notes that are moved, trimmed, or inserted will snap to the nearest time increment using the currently selected time scale and grid size. Grid mode can be applied using either absolute or relative positioning options. Use grid mode for making precise edits and aligning regions and selections using precise time intervals. This mode is probably the mode that I use the most. No, actually, it's the mode that I use most during my recording sessions, because musically it just makes sense. So if you like your sessions to be really organized and the beats that you're using are really nicely structured, I would recommend that you always record in grid mode, because it just makes things so much easier, in my opinion. So you'll see that right now I switched out of the grid mode so you could see that there are no lines. And to drive the point home even further, when you know the tempo of your song. So with this one, I know that the tempo is going to be 150. So watch what happens when I put in the value of our tempo for this. So I want you to watch these lines. So I'm going to change the tempo to what it is, and you can see that those lines shift a little bit. So what I've just done there is I've engaged the grid mode, and those lines, they snapped according to what the tempo of my song is, which is 150 for this particular beat. Now, I mentioned earlier that it's really great and it just makes sense musically, especially if you like things very organized the way I do in my session. So the cool thing about grid mode, and it's important to make sure that your beat is actually snapped to grid mode. So wherever that, I'm not even sure the terminology exactly, but like the upbeat or the downbeat or that accent beat in your music, wherever that first hit is, you would align that to the grid. So let's see if we can find something that makes sense here and change it. Boom, 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 boom. So this seems to be the first thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to snap it there so that now all of those first hits are on my grid lines. And the only reason why you're seeing the grid looking so empty is because I have it measured in bars. So it's measuring by bar. But if I want to be able to see different time measurements, I guess, I can change it so that my grid lines are reflecting half note increments. I can change it to quarter note increments, eighth notes, 16th notes, 32, 64. And you can get pretty detailed in grid mode, but I typically like to keep it in the half note increments. That's just my personal preference. But now all of our transients are on those grid lines. Boom, 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 boom. All right. So all of those first accent hits, they're on the grid mode. So again, the reason why I love using grid mode so much is because when you have a really nicely structured beat the way that this is, your verses are going to be the same length, your hooks are going to be the same length. So when you're going through and you're noting the structure of your song, let's just say that this is the typical structure, right? So instead of in slip mode to where things are just kind of, you can move them around and do whatever. Well, in grid mode, it makes it a lot easier. Let me change that back so it makes sense. In grid mode, it just makes things a lot easier. Say you have a hook that you need to fly. So we're going to pretend that this is a hook, because again, I don't have any vocals for this particular demonstration. But let's say that this is your hook and you don't want your artist to have to re-record it to, you know, match up with the next time the hook comes in, or you don't want to spend time having to inch it across to find just right where it sits on the beat. So in grid mode, what you can do is select where your hook starts, and you can duplicate it to fly it over to the next part of the song where the hook comes in. By pushing Command D, it duplicates it over, and then assuming that all of your verses are the same length, you just keep going through until however many hooks you want throughout your song to be. So again, it just makes things really easy and less complicated in a session when you have the grid mode. And it makes you look really cool, it makes you look fast, and it makes you look efficient in front of your client, so you can quickly and easily move things along for your client and you're not wasting time, basically. Also for grid mode, it makes it easier to do stutters again. Like with the slip mode, you can do stutters, but I feel like the grid mode just gives you a more realistic and musically realistic idea of what those stutters are really supposed to sound like. So let's just see what this sounds like. I'm curious. So we have this is what it originally sounds like. But now what happens if I stutter it? Stutter. See? It just makes more sense, especially when you have a beat that's laid out as nicely as this one. Again, shout outs to Steph C, because this beat is just, it makes my life easier as an engineer when I'm recording, because I can snap it to the grid and now it's easy for me to fly those hooks over for my clients and I'm not wasting time in a session. But yeah, so it just makes sense when you want to stutter the beat, it makes it easier. So let's say that the words in a song even are kind of following that same grid. It makes it easier for you to create that stutter effect and something that sounds and makes sense musically for the client and to the song in general. Boom. So now if your client asks you to make certain stutters in the beat to, you know, make it their own, you can do that in grid mode. And y'all, I just really love grid mode, if you haven't been able to tell by now. But anyway, that's all I have for you on this video. We just went through the editing modes of Pro Tools. It gives you those 4 modes: shuffle, slip, spot, grid. Figure out which editing mode will work best for you depending on what you do. For me, I like to use grid mode because musically, I like when things are laid out and they have a nice structure to them. If you're in film, spot mode is probably really good for you. If you're in radio and you have to make like radio edits, you know, again, commercials like 15, 20, 30-second edits, shuffle mode is probably best for you. If you're doing like podcasting or things that just don't really require a rhythm and they're just kind of free form, slip mode might be the best for you. But again, it just depends on what your purpose is in the session for that particular day and time. So keep those things in mind. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, please give me a big thumbs up, and I'll have more content like this on the way for you, for those of you who are interested in, you know, the functionality of Pro Tools. And we're just going to be starting from scratch. I'm going to be learning all the little details and intricacies with you along the way. So look out for more videos like this. Until next time, peace. All the engineer has to do is sit back and make sure that you get a good sound quality recording. The engineer is not in charge of making sure that you're giving your best performance. You as the artist, you should already know what you want out of your song and what you're going to do to achieve that. So if you don't know that, then that could cause things in the session to move a little bit more.